And we'll talk about this coming up in our third hour tonight. Jen and Rebecca are here in the Amen Corner. I want to start off this evening, though, having an adult conversation. Can we do that? Do I have your permission tonight to do that?
Are you asking us?
No.
We give it to you 100%.
Well, you have to. I pay you to give me that permission. You are the equivalent of curmudgeons or scoundrels in Victorian England days who no one would come to their funeral. So in their estate, they paid for professional mourners. I have to pay you guys to.
I'm a professional mourner.
To give me validation because nobody else wants to. So
Hey.
I have to pay for it.
The sovereign spends the same.
Yes. Not exactly the world's oldest profession, but you're paid well nonetheless. But no, in this case, I'm talking about the audience. And the reason why we need to say this is because there's a lot of emotion wrapped around this topic. A lot of flag waving. And hey, we're patriots. We love this country. But sometimes critical thinking is lost when we rally around the flag. And there are a lot of people in this audience who either themselves or know people that have been involved in these recent conflicts we've had in the Middle East. That certainly is true in my family and in my circle of friends. Maybe someone you care about lost their lives in these conflicts. And because of that, we're going to try to tread lightly on what we're going to talk about here. But this is a conversation that is necessary. We need to have this conversation. I want to refer to a column written by Paul Mulshine. He is the conservative columnist for the Newark Star-Ledger in New Jersey. And of course, we are on the radio there tonight, both via our New York City affiliate, our Philadelphia affiliate. So we've got a lot of people that always respond to us from New Jersey when we take emails or phone calls. And so it just works out that this is in a community where our show is live, because this article brings up some points I think we have to discuss. Discussing these points should not necessarily be construed as an endorsement. As adults, we can critically think, right? I mean, we don't have to run to extremes like children. And sometimes you have to be willing to critically think your own team and your own side. Otherwise, you're just as guilty of the Obama mania and the Obama Messiah stuff that we ridicule the left for doing. This is a column Paul wrote a few months ago. Here's what he says. Do you support the call by John McCain and Lindsey Graham for the U.S. to intervene on the side of the rebels in Syria? If so, congratulations. You're on the same side as the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda. And you're also, Paul writes, really, really gullible. There are a few people in America who really understand this part of the world. Thanks to my job, Paul says, I get to talk to them regularly, and one of them is Bob Baer. Spent most of the 80s and 90s running around the Middle East working for the CIA. In 2003, he came out with a book titled Sleeping with the Devil, How Washington Sold Our Soul for Saudi Crude. I was paging through it the other day when I came across this passage about Syria linking the crowd now behind the rebellion to 9/11. September 11th was almost a class reunion for Syrian Muslim brothers. One of the key figures in the German apparatus fled from Syria to Germany after Hama. Although he denied advanced knowledge of 9/11, he admitted to providing help to 3 of the hijackers. A former Syrian intelligence officer familiar with him told me he had participated in the attack on an artillery school in 1979. Another key Muslim Brotherhood player in 9/11 likely arranged for the 9/11 hijackers' training in bin Laden's Afghani camps. A third ran a Brotherhood front company in Hamburg, Germany. His son was close to Mohammed Atta, remember his name? Was close to Mohammed Atta and the Hamburg terrorist cell members. 2 Syrian brothers in Spain probably provided support to the hijackers. The details are beyond the scope of this book, but the point is that although Washington disliked Assad as much as the Muslim Brotherhood did, Assad was definitely onto something when he decided the Muslim Brotherhood was bad news. This is a quote from this book, now written 10 years ago by a former CIA officer. Now, Molshine says the Muslim Brotherhood has been trying to overthrow the Assad regime since 1982. When they took the city of Hama, cited in the passage above, Assad leveled the place, which shut them up for a while. Eventually, though, they joined with al-Qaeda to put together such operations as the September 11th attacks on New York City. And now, Molshine says, they're trying to take over Syria. Why should we help them? I saw South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham urging us to do that during CPAC in Washington, D.C. back in March. I also heard him say, I've never seen our friends more afraid or our enemies more emboldened. Graham didn't seem to realize that he was confessing the total failure then of the so-called war on terror, if that is the case. It's not hard to see why it failed. Molshine says Graham wants to support the terrorists. He and John McCain spent the past week trying to convince Americans we need to jump into the Syrian civil war, but on the same side as al-Qaeda. And keep in mind, McCain was over there visiting with these people over the Memorial Day weekend. Molshine says this man is living in a fantasy world. I got out of there when I heard Lindsey Graham saying this and went down to the exhibit hall where I ran into a man who's in touch with reality. His name is Larry Johnson, another former CIA guy I talk to quite often. We had a nice chat about the abject stupidity of people like Lindsey Graham in the aftermath of the Iraq invasion. They had a chance to consult with such Mideast experts as Larry's mentor, Pat Lang, but instead, they just jumped into the occupation with no plans for running the country they just occupied. And I'd like to say that is a flippant criticism by a guy writing a column. But the facts on the ground actually would seem to justify this. Iraq was a disaster. It was an unmitigated disaster. I wish that wasn't true, but we have to be honest. We cannot lie to ourselves. Can't buy into groupthink. We have to critically think. Otherwise, we're exactly like the left. Molshine says, the other day, the rebels blew up a mosque whose imam was opposed to them, killing 60 people or so. That's pure terror. And that's what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing in Syria. What makes people like Graham and McCain fall for this nonsense, Molshine writes? I think it may be laziness. Americans are not willing to put in the effort to understand the forces at work in the Middle East. No, we're not. We're not willing to put in the work it takes to understand these forces. I agree with him on that. And it's because we're engaged in what I like to call magical thinking. I will explain what I mean by that next.
You're listening to Steve Deace.
I like you.
The whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God. This is Steve Deace.
Now, I will confess, 10 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I would not have even entertained a column like Paul Molshine's in the New York Star Ledger. I would have viewed this as almost really traitorous. Because I bought into the GOP groupthink, the neocon groupthink. I, too, believed everybody wants to be free and that we can just take American freedom as a template and transfer it to every single belief system and make it compatible therein. We promise you, though, 3 things every night on this show. Fear God, tell the truth, and then make money. So here's the truth. We have facts we cannot ignore. Here's what those facts are. We went to Afghanistan. All we've done now is prop up an absolute crook named Karzai. And there's not a single Christian church left in the country, according to the State Department. We went to Iraq. Christians are fleeing. Now we're told it may devolve into an Iranian satellite state. We wanted to help freedom fighters in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood took over, immediately began persecuting Christians, one of the oldest Christian sects in the world. Coptic Christians, they're fleeing. And now we're going to follow the same game plan in Syria. We are 0 for 3. 0 for 3. All we have done, this isn't my opinion, it's my analysis. I am simply looking at facts. Let's remove emotion, party loyalty, jingoism. Let's be honest. Because it seems to me, and don't tell me, well, we've kept him from coming over here. That's not true. Ask the people of Boston. And if we're not so concerned about them coming over here, why do I need a proctology exam every time I fly somewhere? So let's just be brutally honest here, can we? This has failed. It has cost a lot of lives, both theirs and ours. And all we've done is made it easier for Islamists to target Christians. That's really what we've done. Rand Paul is 100% right about this. That's really all we've done. Regardless of whatever philosophical biases you come into this conversation with, the end result is incontrovertible. We can't argue with it. It is what it is. It is a failure. All we've made it easier to do is empower jihadists and help them target Christians. That's all we've done. Now, am I saying Hosni Mubarak and Assad aren't a comparison? Hosni Mubarak was a gangster, not the vile gangsters the Assad family has been. But am I saying they're heroes? Am I saying Mubarak's a hero? Am I saying the Taliban were heroes? Am I saying that the Assads in Syria are heroes? No, I'm not. What I am saying, though, is I can't think of a single time in recent world history that we have intervened between two despotic regimes, choosing one over the other to suit our own end, that we did not give birth to a bigger monster in the bigger picture. We aided and abetted the Soviet Union to take out Hitler. Stalin killed more people, including more Jews, than Hitler ever had the chance, and used that opening to essentially enslave half that continent for the next 75 years. Hitler didn't even live till he was 75 years old. Blew himself up in a bunker long before that. We aided and abetted what later became the Taliban to stop the Soviets in Afghanistan. I think we all know now how that turned out. We've got American soldiers fighting for Afghani warlords. Can someone explain to me what the point of that is? Why are we doing that? Why? Why? Why are we doing this? Is this what we all signed up for? We're aiding and abetting the worldview we have to defeat, folks. The very worldview that gave birth to freedom and liberty in this country, on this continent, without which freedom and liberty have never happened or been possible for long periods of time anywhere in human history, is the very worldview that the Islamists, when they get control of countries like Iraq and Egypt and now Syria, if that's what John McCain and Lindsey Graham get their way, that's the very worldview they vanquish. That's the very worldview they vanquish. Get rid of everybody that understands the natural law, the laws of nature and nature's God, the governing law of the universe, the Judeo-Christian moral foundation tradition. They vanquish those people. They target them initially. Those are always their first targets. So what I'm saying is, I don't really know what the answer is. I know what it's not. And so do you, if we can stop and think about this critically for at least a little bit. This isn't working. It's not working at all. And I think a lot of this is we would prefer a truth to be true that's not, because we're afraid of what we might have to do if it's not true. And in a culture that is watering down its morality, its traditions, its religious beliefs, as we are right now, we are not equipped for this level of worldview confrontation. And that's why they're winning. So you may think because they're not successfully reorchestrating 9/11s, that means we are winning. That's wrong. They're winning. And the reason they're winning is we are helping them colonize, essentially recolonize the Ottoman Empire. That's what we're helping them do. That's really what we're helping them do. And you're paying for it. This is the John McCain that wants Americans to be disarmed through gun control, but he wants Americans to arm Syrian rebels infiltrated by jihadists, just as the jihadists infiltrated the Chechnyan rebels, just as they infiltrated the Iraqi rebels, just as they infiltrated the Egyptian rebels, and just as they have already infiltrated the Syrian rebels. Enough is enough. This policy is getting us nowhere. I don't know what the answer is. I do know what the answer is not. And I also know we won't find what the right answer is as long as we continue to persist in what has been an abject failure.